Good day, everyone. Welcome to the 6th installment of our EdWeb 2020 series, where the Education Sector Group at Al-Tamimi takes a look at education sector developments across the region and across different sectors within education. And we're delighted to be joined with a stellar panel of experts and pioneers who are working at the front line in education and who will give us their insights into the topic today, which is the K-12 investment climate across the Middle East. And today is Bastille Day, so congratulations to anyone from France. And my goal today is to try and tear down the walls of the Bastille that is the education sector in the Middle East and hopefully give some good insights. I know that was a pretty far-stretched analogy there, but I needed to bring in Bastille Day. So without further ado, what I would like to do, firstly, is I'd like to say to anyone, we're trying to make this interactive, and we will have time at the end to take any questions. So there is a functionality on the side of the GoToWebinar software where you can ask questions. So please do ask questions, and we will then put them to our panelists at the very end. But without further ado, we have a lot to get through today, and I want to introduce our panel, and I'll ask them to introduce themselves in their own words. Sean, over to you first, please.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Sean Robertson, the CEO of BBD Education. We work with investors, school operators, real estate developers, schools and teachers in the GCC and also in Asia. So I'm delighted to join this expert panel today. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Mansoor, over to you.
Hi, my name is Mansoor Ahmad. I'm the Director for Health Education and PPP for the Middle East and North Africa. We work a lot in Saudi, UAE, and Egypt. We do the feasibility studies and valuations, and also have a number of investors to bring in international operator to their respective countries. And I think as we go along, we can discuss more about it.
Thank you, Mansoor. Mohammed.
Hi, my name is Mohammed. I'm the CEO of Sira. We're Egypt's largest investor into private education. We run a large number of schools, universities, and basically we have around 40,000 students currently in Egypt. We're there for the past 27, 28 years, and we're listed in the Egyptian stock market. We're an active company when it comes to all global trends when it comes to education and bringing things to the MENA. I would claim that we're leading on a pioneer path within our country in terms of bringing education to specifically the Egyptian middle class.
And first education IPO in Egypt as well, Mohammed. So well done to you for that. And also we have, unfortunately we can't see him, but he's on the line, and it's Basim. Basim, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Thank you, Ivor. This is Basim Ibrahim from the Saudi Ministry of Investment. I'm the Investment Development Manager for the education and training sector under the Investment Attraction and Development.
Thank you, Basim. Great to have you all aboard. And Sean, can I start with you? What's your feeling about the Middle East market generally, the schools market? What's your feeling of how things are going?
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're in the midst of recovery at the minute from the global crisis, which obviously still isn't over for many people. But the Middle Eastern school market has always been a crucible for education investors. It's always been at the forefront of innovation. You know, the Middle East has got so many different types of school groups, family-run groups, different price points, curricula. And it's always been at the forefront of true innovation in private education. So I think, you know, at the minute we're being tested, no doubt about it. But I think on the whole, the region will come through because it's already been through a hell of a lot already historically. And the education sector in the Middle East is largely run by school groups. And being a group in the current environment is far much stronger than being a standalone school. So I think we will see a recovery. I think we will see the deal rate generally go up in the next 6 to 12 months. And I think we will continue to see parents in the region choosing private education because the standards of private education are generally high. I'm optimistic about the future. Obviously, we've got to try and get through this this time at the moment, but I'm confident that the school operators will pull through, and we'll see a pretty big bounce back.
Thanks, Sean. And Mansoor, the same question to you. What are you hearing on the ground, and what are you hearing from your contacts?
I think we actually run two surveys recently. One is in Dubai of the school operator and one in Saudi. And the feedback which we are getting is that the operators are quite realistic, I would say, looking at what's going to happen in September. Everybody's focused on what's going to happen in September. The key issue is at this moment is that there are different ministries and others who are saying that the school will open, but how they will open, what would be the mode of basically delivery, whether it will be 100% physical or a blended or still the online will be the case. But so at this moment, I believe the issue is that it's a more of a wait and watch game. Although the operator has done their homework, whatever will be the delivery mode, they would be there in September. So I think all in all, there is expectation that there will be probably in GCC there could be a drop in number of students because number of experts are leaving or has left the country. But on the other hand, we have a different view that a lot of people who left, if you look at UAE and other, they probably are not the families. They are basically working individual in different sectors, so they don't have a family. But yes, there will be an impact. There will be a decrease in probably decrease in some percentage of students. The survey which we done, people said anything between 5 to 10%. But I think there will be definitely one change will be there, that there will be student moving from the premium school to the mid-income, mid-tier schools and affordable schools.
Thanks, Mansoor. And Mohammed, if I can ask you the same question, we will do a deep dive into Egypt, but just your general view on the state of the market at the moment.
I mean, so I would borrow a word from Sean, which is everybody's getting tested, and I think that's the name of the game currently. For a very long time, we have looked at the education sector as a very stable sector. To a large extent, it's extremely defensive in nature. But I think the COVID crisis is a time where different operators are going to be tested to do three things. One is their ability to adjust to change, and that's where something that educators don't usually like. Second, the ability to be able to cater to customer needs in a very fast pace, which again is not something very customary for the educational sector. And third, and most importantly, it's about how do we do our business moving forward. And these three questions, what is shaping everything that's going on in education going forward these days? I think no one knows what's going to happen by September because we're living on a week-by-week basis now. But I have some key fundamental I came out with through this experience, and I think it's shaping how Egypt, for example, is taking a look at education now. I mean, there is a general consensus that this whole phenomena of online education is definitely coming up, it's appearing, but there's a public perception that this is not really a suitable solution for specific ages, specifically until at K-12, when we take a look at kindergarten up to grade 7 or 8, there's a lack of not even Egyptian, but global satisfaction level when it comes to delivering education in this matter. So I think there is a solidified global opinion now that we need young students to come to school, continue conventional learning, and that online is not going to be a replacement at any point of time. However, there is a perception now higher schoolers can start seeing more of blended forms of education going forward in preparation for a new way of how we're doing university education. So what I say, there is a perception or a pickup across the Egyptian local market, taking a look at that, yes, we need more core elementary schools until grade 7 or 8. We might start to seeing more blended high schooling models appearing on the picture as we go through. And that's for the K-12. For higher education, it's already on a blended approach that has been applied a few years, and this year it's even increased. I mean, the Ministry of Higher Education have announced that the fall is going to be a blended semester in all cases, so 2 to 3 days on campus, 2 to 3 days online. And it's very similar to trying to emulate what's going to happen with the workplace going forward. So that's the status. It's a bit of ambiguity, a bit of change, and I think by comes the end of this fall, you're going to see a lot of filtering between operators, who is able to change, who's not able to change. I call it the ice age of education to a large extent. So either you're going to come out with a very solidified DNA, ability to adjust, or you're going to collapse as an educational operator. We remain quite optimistic. We remain quite optimistic on the fact that a lot of parents will be seeking private sector solutions, because now they want faster pace, adjustability, ability to work with international partners, which cannot be afforded by the government. We know that. But I think the era is going to come, definitely, that's coming for affordable middle class based schooling rather than niche markets, as Mansour exactly said. And that's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Mohammed. And apologies to anyone that saw me upside down or sideways there. Hopefully, I'm in the same upright position as everyone else. Thanks, Mohammed, for that. And turning to Bassem to maybe take a dive into Saudi Arabia. Bassem has all the facts and figures. He's got incredible data about the Saudi market and the size of it. And it's simply sort of a breathtaking size. But Bassem, from your point of view, it'd be interesting to hear your views on the Saudi market and the needs for private education there, and whether the current crisis is affecting it in any material way. It'd be great to hear your insights, Bassem.
Well, definitely everyone knows that Saudi has the largest market among all the Gulf cooperation countries. And now people have been witnessing more and more demand in this market, especially during the good times before the whole world was hit with the COVID-19. Now, if you look at the size of market and numbers, it was really difficult to measure the private sector size of market, because there were so many issues in capturing the data of private schools. We have almost 5,500 private schools during the time between 2017 and 2018. The number is increasing, but I believe we haven't reached 6,000 schools yet. But if you look at the public sector or the public schools, we have almost 30,000 schools across the kingdom. Some of them are in very remote areas, where they don't have that even big number of students attending. But several consultancy companies, several researchers have tried to determine the size of market. I remember BCG had a conclusion of $5 billion size of market back in 2017. They had a projection that the market will increase up to $12 billion in 2023. I believe we are standing today at maybe between $8 or $9 billion size of market. So which also gives you a good indication about where we're heading in the private sector and the private education in Saudi Arabia. The good news is that we are still seeing the participation of the private sector in this K-12 segment in particular, standing at almost 14%. And I remember since I joined the Ministry of Investment back in 2017, I kept hearing the Ministry of Education saying that they want to increase the number of or the percentage up to 25%. They want to see 25% of the students of Saudi Arabia in private schools. They want to see the quarter of the schools in the kingdom that should be owned by the private sector. So this basically creates the full picture of demand and the size of market here in Saudi Arabia. When it comes to the price point, I keep telling all the investors, there is no limitation when you set your price points for private education offering. It's just a matter of making sure that the Ministry of Education approves your pricing points before, parents complain later on or consumers complain later on. So the size is big, the size of the opportunity is big, the market is huge, the market is welcoming all the investors. Opportunities are being created day after day. We have even worked with the Ministry of Education on knowing exactly where could be the highest demand, which cities, which areas. The future looks very promising.
Thank you, Bassem. And Can I ask you about, just to say, I mean, you guys have an incredible amount of information that you publicly make available and share, incredible slide decks and all this data, which is very helpful. And I'm sure if anyone's interested, we can get it to them after this. In relation to the investor appetite in Saudi Arabia, Basil, I know, you know, traditionally there are a lot of local groups in Saudi that have their own schools and are interested in doing joint ventures with new brands coming in. But have you seen any change in the appetite in the kingdom over the last while, or is it still optimistic?
Well, definitely the appetite was hit by the COVID-19. I mean, most of the investors' plans are now on hold. And again, as my colleagues and my friends here in the webinar have explained earlier, we are still witnessing and you know, expecting some major announcements week by week. Last thing we've heard was yesterday by the Minister of Education referring to 3 scenarios of resuming the schools. They might follow a color coding scenario. They might do the 50-50 attendance scenario. They might even put some of the schools or convert some of the schools into virtual schools completely. So it's just now a matter of understanding what kind of protocol that the Ministry of Education will follow. And as the Minister promised a couple of days ago, the Ministry currently is drafting this protocol. We're expecting the publication of the protocol within the next 2 weeks. But there will be schools in September, and there will be some very, very cautious measures to be followed.
Thanks, Basil. Sean, can I turn to you and ask, are you a bull or a bear on Saudi?
Yeah, I'm definitely a bull. I'm, you know, I know that we're in a difficult period now. I know that everyone's looking at the medium-term future, September on the horizon. But ultimately, I believe that the bounce back, once we get through this period, will be strong. At the end of the day, we've seen a shift of Saudi nationals moving to private schools because of the need for high-quality education. We know that Saudi Arabia has a large youth population, and we know about the higher education statistics as well, with Saudi nationals choosing US universities as a destination of choice. If you look at that, and then you also look at the economic growth and the different sectors that are now emerging in Saudi Arabia because of the development that's been put in place, then in the long term, education will be a growth sector. And I think we will see different types of schools, different curricula, premium, mid-market, low-fee schools. They'll all be needed. And I think, you know, once we just get through this difficult period, I think the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia will be the largest market in the GCC, but also the highest growth market. And I think the challenge for any international operators moving in is, you know, is well publicized. You know, they need a strong partner. They need local knowledge. They need to understand the regulations, but that doesn't generally put people off, especially who are looking for that growth. So I'm optimistic once we get through this period that that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia will be the biggest bounce back in the region.
Thank you, Sean. Mansour, a very unambiguous view from Sean. He's not sitting on the fence. What's your view on Saudi?
The Saudis, as Sean and Basim has said, that the market is the biggest market in the GCC. We were working on a number of operators who wanted to come to the region, and number of investors in Saudi who are looking at the schools and bringing, international operator or regional operator. We think that after September, before end of the year, things will be a bit more clear. You cannot, as Muhammad has also highlighted, you cannot basically remove the physical education completely out of the picture. There will be a phase adjustment, and then things will be that there will be higher class level than other, you can offer online or distance learning. But all in all, I think Saudi market, we think that the projects which are put on hold September, by end of the first quarter, last quarter, by December, those projects will be relooked. How many will be alive, I don't know, but I think most of them will be relooked and readjusted and will be restarted.
And can I ask you a question? I mean, Sean touched on it about the number of Saudi students who end up at US universities. And Basim's got the stats. I mean, incredible numbers. But traditionally, US schools have been less expansionist or international than UK schools. I don't know. I mean, have you seen any more courageous US schools who are thinking of maybe going beyond the confines of the North American continent?
Yes, I think that is first of all, the number, the last research we did, around 60,000 of Saudi nationals are in US higher education. 60,000 of them. It is like, compared to, I think, the second largest in US after China, and China is, a billion population. They have around 75,000 or something. So if you look at the ratio wise, it is very high. Unfortunately, our experience is, and we got few things with you also. Our US operator are not that courageous. They don't see outside US there's the market compared to British operator. So what we are now doing is a couple of projects which we are doing in the region, which is not just in Saudi, in Egypt also. That top-notch British operator who has the experience of running very established brand in UK, and they are coming to the Middle East. They are also that, okay, fine, we will also offer American, because that's what we actually basically encourage to do that, because American operator, they are very reluctant to go anything outside. Even in Europe, they become quite reluctant. Europe also, there are American schools, but they are homegrown schools. They are not branches of established American brands. So yeah, I think that's a problem we see, and still we see that problem, that American schools are not that aggressive and willing to take a risk to expand into this region.
Thanks, Mr. I see Sean nodding. It seems like a no-brainer, Sean, doesn't it?
Yeah, we've experienced the same. Generally, getting US operators to expand internationally anywhere is a challenge. And when you narrow down the criteria to very specific things like a mid-market school in Saudi Arabia, trying to find a US operator who wants to expand to do a mid-market school overseas, you're talking about, a very minute number of schools. So, the options then, push you either towards a UK franchise model, or you look at starting a homegrown brand with US educators. And for people who are particularly brand conscious, it's a real challenge. I mean, internationally, American teachers are very hard to recruit as well. Out of all of the nationalities to recruit, we find that Americans are the hardest to recruit on scale. So with Saudi Arabia having the US curriculum as one of the top curricula to choose from, there's a bit of a challenge there from a market perspective. So it then leads us to then look at Middle Eastern operators, or as Mansour has said, a UK operator who could also operate a US curriculum. And that's often what we're left with in order to try and match this market need.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Mohammed from Egypt, we've lost your picture, but you may still be on the line. I'm just checking, are you still with us? Because I wanted to turn to Egypt and ask, sort of drill down into that market. Yes, thanks, Mohammed. I was going to, we've drilled into some of the figures in Saudi. I'd be interested to hear your opinion on Egypt and the appetite for Egypt, the type of operators that you're seeing that want to come in internationally, and maybe the type of investment that's available in the market for these brands that might be interested in Egypt, and just to hear a little bit more about it, because it's a massive market that a lot of people outside this region don't particularly know very well, frankly speaking. Mohammed, you're on mute.
Have the key fundamental when it comes to it.
We can hear you. Sorry.
Sorry.
We can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Perfect. So, I mean, the key fundamental when it comes to the Egyptian market is numbers. So, I mean, we are a populous nation to a large extent, and there's around 24 million students between K-12 and higher education in Egypt, larger than the populations of Arab countries, the number of Arab countries combined together. But the question becomes, if you want to penetrate, this is not a market that's going to be looking at high-end, expensive operators to a large extent. Because if you take a look at the dichotomy of the Egyptian K-12 market, 10% of the market goes to private schooling. Out of that 10%, only 10% of which can afford high-end schools. So if you take a look at the total gamut of K-12 students, only 1% can afford really high-end schools. And in Egypt, you do have schools ranging from 10 to 12 pounds till British pounds till 25, 30. So I mean, we do have some expensive schools here, but that only caters to 1% of the Egyptian student population. The rest of the tier is people who are able to provide quality education for middle class tier, so affordable fees, good quality. And that's something that not a lot of operators are interested to jump into, specifically American, like as Sean likely mentioned. So space is more adjusted for homegrown basic players, able to align with international operators and form some sort of a dichotomy where you're able to extract good quality education at the same time, address local market, train teachers, be able to provide a formula that is affordable at the same time, comes with a specific level of quality that will allow a parent to invest in the children because they know they're going to get a better future going forward. But still, this 10% is around 2 to 3 million students. So I mean, still, it's a very populous target segment to move into. Traditionally, we have seen a lot of operators trying to move into Egypt for the past 10 to 15 years. This has been increasing by the day. And I think the COVID crisis, of course, has frozen to a large extent a lot of this movement, but this will continue to happen as we move forward. In terms of higher education, the momentum is even higher because Egypt is in need of universities. I mean, according to the OECD statistics, Egypt needs around 50 universities by the end of 2030 to be able to absorb the number of graduates coming in every year. I mean, let me give you one figure I always mention is that if you take a look at the Egyptian K-12 segment, grade 12 in Egypt is around 880,000 students. Kindergarten 1 is 2.5 million. So every year you have massive increase of students that is graduating, and they want space at universities, which we don't have. So that's where a lot of also private investment and global operations is happening now as we speak in Egypt, either under the international branch campus umbrella or investors who tend to support local operators to grow. So I'm very optimistic on the growth of the market. There is a lot of space for foreign investment coming through. However, seeing a direct operator coming in and moving in without local adjustability or ability to match doesn't really succeed on the ground. So if you're able to reach this equation, definitely it's going to be a very good, solid market to move in.
Thank you, Mohammed. And Mansour, you're familiar with the market. I know you've been office there, and you've been going to Egypt for years. I'd be interested to hear your perspective on the market.
I think what Mohammed has highlighted, that the important thing is you need to know the market. You need to be on ground to understand the market. So we was there. We have an office there, and I think before the COVID, I used to go every month to Egypt, and so you need to understand the market. What we have seen is that the market is so big, like as Mohammed highlighted, the total school is like 24 million. Is the student in a school, and around 10% of it is in private sector. You have all the segment. Mostly it is the mid-tier and affordable school, but you have the higher schools also, which can pay $15,000, what you call it, annual tuition fees. So what we have seen is that again, American schools are a bit reluctant to come. We were working with a couple of them that were reluctant to come, but the Kent College School, which is in Dubai also, they have signed a deal, and we were working on the behalf of the investor there. So there are British schools who are coming, but they need to look at adjust the fees. So what you're offering in Dubai you probably will be offering 25% less fees in Egypt, and you still get number of students. Other key factor would be that attracting teachers to Egypt, international teachers to Egypt. That would be a key factor. But what we have seen compared to all the other market, Egypt is one of the market where people are going ahead. They are basically, we are working on a couple of projects where they're going ahead to even start the construction, because they're saying that the school building will be ready in 2022 or 2023. By that time, there will be a solution. There will be a solution. How we need to adjust it over a period, but we will not going to, we're not going to basically stop the construction. So Egypt market is difficult market, I would say. There is one interesting point I want to highlight here, especially working in Egypt. The school operator are very reluctant, American school operator. But American universities are very open to come to this region, and especially in Egypt. So we're working with a couple of American universities who want to open their branch campuses. So university we found is far more open of an idea of expansion in the schools. So yes, Egypt for us, the Egypt market besides Saudi and UAE, Egypt is one of the biggest market for as a business also for us.
And I totally agree. I see Sean nodding as well, but the universities have made a stampede, haven't they? The international branch campuses to Cairo, to the new administrative capital and elsewhere. It's been quite incredible. But Sean, can I ask you a question? It's interesting because almost all the panelists mentioned it obliquely or expressly one way or another, and that is about building relationships on the ground. And whatever side of the fence you're on, if you're the operator, the investor, generally speaking, there's going to be some cultural differences in how quickly a deal might progress, or due diligence, and how things are done. You've been involved in lots of these deals. I'd be interested to hear your opinion on how either side can navigate that type of issue.
Yeah, it's unfortunately it's too common. It still happens in every market: Egypt, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, UAE, and a lot of schools. Most people don't realize a lot of schools in the UK are actually unequipped to expand internationally. And the reason why they're unequipped is international expansion is actually quite a recent phenomenon. International education is quite a recent phenomenon. It's only the past 2 decades where we've seen the explosion of international education. Before that, international education was largely, embassy schools, oil company schools, and it's only the past 2 decades when we've seen huge growth. So what has happened historically is that schools have thought that they can enter a market without doing the proper due diligence on the ground, as Mansour has said. And quite often you have a mix of cultural challenges that you have to overcome. You have business working practices, how people do business in those contexts. And then you have the regulatory challenges dealing with the regulatory officers who often operate in their own way in different cities, even within one country. So you need local knowledge, you need local people on the ground, you need people who understand how to get things done. And quite often, the international operators who are moving into the market are either unequipped to expand, or they're too proud, and they often try to replicate what they did in their previous country, where perhaps there's not as much competition, there's not as many factors that could potentially be a barrier to your success. So it's often a myriad of challenges, and you need local support. You need people who know how to get things done with the government. You need people who actually know what the unwritten rules are. And quite often we see people who are following a rule book, but they don't know that there's an unwritten rule book with the guy who works in the government office, who's been doing it a different way for the past 10 years. And they're all, these are all very common mistakes, but they can often be very, very costly. if you get it wrong. And one of the things I'll just finish by summarizing. One of the things that I think all of the countries in the Middle East share in common is that the people here in the region like to see that foreign nationals coming in are committed to their countries and are committed to the sector. They don't want a fly-by-night situation where someone is just trying to sell their name and make a quick buck, and that can be flushed out very quickly. And quite often people don't see the bigger picture of the Middle East. They don't understand the youth population here. They don't understand the history. And the operators that have been successful are the ones that have contextualized their products for those specific markets, and they're committed to those markets, and they're committed to those different national visions that are very public. And that's one of the true tests, I think, for international operators is, of course, bring your brand in, but show that you've got skin in the game and make a real commitment to that country, to that city on the ground.
Very well said, Sean. And just a reminder to our audience, if they have any questions, please do send them in, and we'll get them to the panel. Mansour, just would you like to add anything to Sean's piece? I mean, everything he said, I totally agree with. But one of the things, as a lawyer, people ask us to make sure the contracts are all signed, sealed, and delivered. But in one way, it's the relationships way more important. And I suppose when you come from a Western background, we do have a legalistic opinion. It needs to be all here, literally. But that doesn't always work in this part of the world. And due diligence on your partner is critical, isn't it?
I think it is very important. One is that due diligence on the partner. You need to be there to understand. I always say that education and healthcare also. It's not a franchise business. It's not McDonald's or Starbucks where this is the recipe, this is the design of the shop, and you can go and open it anywhere. Here you need to get involved. So the people need to come, and the investor in the region, being in the region 20 years or so, the investors are becoming very sophisticated. They don't want just a brand name now. They want the operator to and establish the school. In many cases where we are working, we say that in the first couple of years, you should train one of your, number 2 headmaster or something in UK and transfer them here so that he can establish the school. Bring some teachers from your existing school, not just recruited from the market. I think that's very important, is that knowing the culture, knowing the market. Unless you walk on the ground and see where is the school, who will be people you will be targeting another, that would be something which is still lacking. A lot of international operators, they don't want to make those commitments. They just want to make quick bucks. Sean said, just give the name and this is our recipe, and you can basically open the school, because that is also bad. That even in some cases the investor may take it, but if and most likely that it will going to happen that the school will not perform according to, and it's going to have a negative impact on the brand image back home also, where in UK you have a negative image there. So having local knowledge is, for me, is the most successful before when you do a sort of a marriage, you need to date the girl, understand the family and everything. So I think same thing more applicable here. You are making a long-term commitment. Schools are not a retail where you close the shop. Schools are, when you make a school, you are basically committed for 20, 25 years or even longer than that.
Well, Mansour, I think I can speak on behalf of Sean, myself and yourself, that we've all been up the aisle left holding the bouquet a few times, haven't we? But it's through no fault of our own. But Basim, if you're still with us, I would like to bring up the topic of EdTech. I'm sorry, this isn't an EdTech webinar, but we can't have a discussion about investment in bricks and mortar schools in the Middle East without talking about the impact of EdTech and whether it will have a material impact on the existing school model. Basim, if you're with us, I mean, it's interesting from Saudi's point of view, given the number of PPPs you're doing for building physical schools. I know most of these were issued last year, but we're talking thousands of schools. And I'm just wondering, do you have any view, personal or otherwise, in relation to that building program, and whether that the requirement for the physical infrastructure is going to change now.
Absolutely. When it comes to the infrastructure of the educational buildings, it is something now that is booming in Saudi Arabia, especially with all the privatization projects we are witnessing, led by the National Center of Privatization. They have already finished a couple of waves. Each wave had 60 educational buildings dedicated for K-12s, and some of the most of them were in major cities, Jeddah in the western region, and also Mecca and Medina, as well as all those land bankers that we keep working with on daily basis. They have a huge amount of lands that they want to dedicate and they want those lands to be invested by educational investors. They want someone to build a school on it, or a campus, or a training academy. So basically, the infrastructure hasn't been a problem really in Saudi Arabia when it comes to education. It's just a matter of again, understanding where the opportunities are and who's leading those opportunities, and how to be connected with the opportunity owners.
And Basim, do you see any? I mean, there's talk in the UAE, for example, that any new schools being built might be built differently now, you know, because of blended learning, maybe become permanent or semi-permanent. So the actual physical structure might change of a school being built today as opposed to one that was built a few years ago. Any opinion on that from a Saudi point of view?
I think the best thing the Ministry of Education have done in the past years was delegating a huge and a full company to manage all the operations for the educational buildings. That is Tatweer for educational buildings, or Tatweer for Buildings company. It's a private company. It's owned by the government, but it manages all the everything related to the educational buildings, especially for the K-12, even the licensing for operators. I think that was the best thing that happened in this file in particular. And now they are advancing, and they are even setting the standards really high, and they are increasing the quality in those educational buildings by also approving several engineering drawings and engineering designs for those buildings. So I believe we are getting better and better in terms of the setting the standards and meeting the international standards for educational buildings, and that's completely led by Tatweer for Building, which I see as a good thing in the sector. Thanks,
Basim. And maybe if asking Mohammed from Cairo if he can join us for this one, because I know Mohammed, you're very interested in ed tech. I know you have that interest, and you have various companies involved in that particular sector. Then you have your physical schools, so you actually have both. You've got a good 360-degree view on this. Do you think the physical buildings are going to change significantly? I mean, we're not talking small changes here, but do you think it's going to be significantly upturned, or are we all getting a bit too hot under the collar over this, and it's going to pass?
As mentioned before, I mean, as you rightly mentioned, we've been doing EdTech for almost 10 years now in terms of investment and trying to change the way. But I mean, don't think of it as a way in which we're going to see less physical schools. It's definitely going to impact parts of the education, as I mentioned before, like you see it more happening at high school and also more at university front. The future is for the blended rather than online. I can tell you now that if you get a group of parents now and interview 10 of them, 9 of them are going to tell you, I want physical school back. So I mean, for a very long time we have played with this idea that online might be the new disruption. In fact, your customer base still prefer physical presence for all sorts of needs, because at the end of the day, and this ties into your previous point, education is not about putting students in a classroom and giving them content. Be quite frank, with the internet these days, you don't need to give anyone content. There's enough content for everyone to grasp. The idea is about socialization, cultural adaptation, ability to learn. All of these things needs interaction, needs peer-to-peer. I mean, if we take a look at the educational systems we have nowadays, the top 10, they were not the top 10 educational systems we had 20 years ago. I mean, now we hear about the Singapore system, the Canadian system, the Finnish system, and what most of these systems do is that they have more and more peer-to-peer work, classroom, project-based learning, and this needs physical presence to a large extent. So, I mean, the world is coming to an understanding that the more we're able to work together as teams, the more we're able to interact somehow, the better we are. And this is going to happen in some form of blended atmosphere. So you're going to end up having schools eventually. How many students does these schools serve? Are we going to have the classical example of just saying that, for example, one physical asset can serve 1,000 students versus the fact that it can serve 2,000 students over 2 shifts? Some part can be online and some part can be offline. This will be the discussion we're going to have as we move forward with this blended experience to a large extent. So it's very early inside. Also, a lot of what's happening with the EdTech happens within the classroom itself. Like we've been investing in companies that's trying to transform Alexa into a teacher's assistant. I mean, it's not just about actually what's happening outside of the classroom, or what's happening within the classroom. Now you have the mocks when you actually have what they call them, the virtual teacher, where you actually go into a classroom, you scan your watch, and voila, you have a teacher that's coming out that's actually explaining your experience based on the students who signed in. So the transformation is happening, whether within the physical assets or what we call it distance learning, but the future for sure is for the blended platform. So we might end up building less schools, but the practice is going to continue in some form of blended. That's how I see it, at least personally, from my personal experience.
Thank you, Mohammed. Sean, can I bring you in on the same question? I'd be interested to hear your views, because you know the model, the PropCo-OpCo model, potentially under threat here. But just generally, I'd like to hear your opinion on it.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with what Mohammed has just said to a large extent. I think the future is in blended learning, but I also think that we will see a shift of some parents moving to online. I don't mean a majority. It's a minority, but some parents are going to move to online in the short term, and it's also going to cater towards some parents who are a bit more mobile in the current workplace. The future, I think, with school buildings is a bit more uncertain. From the OpCo-PropCo side, this model doesn't lend itself really to 21st century learning and 21st century employment, because if we move to a blended kind of WeWork style model of education, then you're going to have people in and out at different times. You're going to have some people in less than others. Spaces all have to be flexible, and it's how we envisage the workplace. So if we envisage the workplace to be like that, then we shouldn't be thinking of schools in a more of a traditional way. Now, what I think is, we're not going to see schools change massively on the whole. We're just going to see new schools emerge. So from a design perspective, prior to COVID, this was actually last year, we worked on designing a school that had 5% circulation in the building. And a normal traditional school has 25% circulation, and that 25% is generally the corridors, and corridors are just wasted spaces. So we said, look, let's try and design a school where there aren't any wasted spaces, and every single area of the school is used for some purpose, be it flexible learning, a kind of avenue of makerspace, that type of thing. And I think the future of school design is in that, where children are working in pods, they are working in small groups. They might actually be spending more of the school day online themselves because it's more efficient. But as Mohammed said, there's still a need for the social interaction. There's still a need for the community aspect. There's still a need for health and physical activity. So all of those things will remain. But I just think we've come a long way in the past 4 months, remarkably. And I've heard teachers say that the past 4 months has been the best professional development they've ever had, because they've had to upskill in so many different ways, because there hasn't been a choice. That to go back to old ways of working without really learning from this would be a step in the wrong direction, in my opinion.
Thanks, Sean. And Mansoor, we're in your real estate hat. I'm sure I'm sure your clients are phoning you looking to either enforce or get out of leasehold obligations. But I'm interested to hear your take on this, on the PropCo, OpCo, and how you think it's going to go.
I think a little bit different view is that it will depend upon the physical requirement will be there. And in the short term, actually, you need more space, especially in September and other, where if you are going to social distancing, having instead of 24 student or 25 student in a class, if you have a 10 student in a class, you basically need more classrooms than other, but nobody going to build it for that. We see is that for the junior classes, still there will be a demand for physical. For the senior classes, yes, you can move toward distance learning and other, but junior classes, the kindergarten, the nurseries, and junior classroom students in the school. And also, I think the model will not, one model will not fit for all the countries in the region. It will also depend upon how many, like take the example of how many parents are working parents. If the both parents are working parents, they would like to see their kid go to the school because otherwise one of them has to quit the job or they need to hire a home tutor. So I believe the demand, people will be more cautious, the business will be more practical, but the demand for schools or the building will be first, there will be a couple of years where utilization of the current building will become more efficient, and you probably don't need a lot of new schools. But as the population will grow, I mean, Saudi, Egypt, and other, you will need more schools on ground. The other thing, one thing I just wanted to highlight, and we do have another session on Thursday on that, but I want to highlight here also that when the buildings are being built, school buildings, mostly a disconnect. They want to make beautiful marbles and other, which may not be practical. And then the cost becomes so high, and that's what we've seen in the region now, that the cost of buildings are so high that the rent which a landlord is being committed, the operator after a certain time, they are not able to pay for it. So I think important thing is that when you are doing a school building or a landlord is building, or you are asking to do a build to suit to a landlord or even an investor who owns the property as well as business, you want to make sure it's a practical building with a minimum. You are not compromising on what is required, but you don't need marbles and other because the rent or the payment to the banks becomes so high that your operation or the business never makes money.
Thanks, Mansoor. And we're running out of time. Just a final question, maybe for Sean and then Mansoor, given your roles. Sean, are you seeing? I mean, the perception, particularly by the UAE, was that valuations, school valuations, were a bit unrealistic prior to March. Are you seeing much change in that as the needle move? And are you seeing a lot of interest from people looking for motivated sellers in the region? And what's your take on it?
Yeah, my take on it is that we've seen a lot of people come back to offers that were made to them a year ago, asking if that is still available, and that offer isn't available because the market has shifted amongst all the uncertainty as well. It means that people are naturally a bit more cautious today. But the market has certainly come down from last year in terms of the valuations. There is a lot of deals generally in the market, and I think the deal rate is up. But the challenge that everyone has at the minute is the uncertainty of September. So when people are projecting to try and get a deal in the future, projecting beyond September and October is anybody's guess at the moment. So I think what we'll see is we'll see a bit of a cash flow crunch in the next 3 months, which will mean that there will be deals being made in the market. But these might not be wholesale sale of school or school groups. They might be, equity sales. But we will in the future see a lot more deals generally in the market, because post COVID-19, a mature market, which the UAE I think is heading towards being a mature market, generally you see more deals than greenfield opportunities. and there's a lot of external investors and external school groups with a strong interest in the UAE because it's seen as a strong market in the international education sector. So I think yes, valuations have gone down. Medium term will be a problem. Long term will still be strong.
Thank you, Sean. Mansoor, what's your take on that one?
I think same. There are already deals are coming in, and there will be more deals coming in by September and by end of this year. The valuation has gone down. We were talking before COVID, end of last year, early this year, maybe in OpCo 7 to 9 multiples. Now people are talking about 5, 6.5 multiple. But nobody may, at least as far as we know, nobody is trying to make a deal now. They're saying just do all the homework and we may wait for September when the school will, how many students will be there and what will be the model there, how much is 50-50 blended learning or whatever. I think that's one thing. On the side, and we have a different opinion on that. It was around 8% yield which people are looking, sales and lease back another. Now they are saying that it's a more riskier market, so we 10% yield. The investor is saying on sale the lease back. Our view is a little bit different on that. There people will sign at 10% and then they will default in next 6 months or so. So if a buyer is coming to us, we say better to take a 7% but have a rent which operator can actually pay you, not committed to a rent which after 6 months they will default. So for us, if you look at overall, people are asking around 9-10% instead of 7 to 8%. But we believe it's a wrong approach. You should look at the realistic rent which an operator can pay. And based on that, you may accept a lower yield, but a more, what you call it, something which you can actually receive it, than something which you're not going to receive it. So yes, I think after September, we will see a lot of merger and acquisition, and with 3 of us will be probably working on a lot of deal together.
Amen to that. Just some final reflections. Basim, if you're still with us, I'm sure you are. Just wonder your final thoughts on the subject of investment in the Middle East in the K-12 sector and your outlook on that.
Again, Ivor, the future looks promising. Although we were hit with such a crisis, we believe that everything will be positive again and will be better. It was a very good learning experience for most of the schools operators. It was a very good learning experience for the government to react and to act during such tough time. How to manage the.
Basim, we seem to have lost Basim. Mohammed El Khala, can I ask you your final thoughts on the topic, please?
My final thoughts, as I mentioned, I still remain optimistic. I think it's a change for the better to a large extent. The sector definitely needed some shaking up, and I think the process is in place now. So I remain quite optimistic, and as I always mentioned, if you're a strong operator able to balance things up, I can only see the demand growing as we go forward for private offering. Just have to be a very good package as we keep it this way. And that's why I remain extremely optimistic, and as Sira, we see a bright future. I mean, we didn't decline a single expansion line from what we're planning to do. Still on track with everything, and one thing we're always sure of is that there is birth rate that's going high worldwide. I mean, there's a number of students that are coming in. There is a lot of people that will be looking for seats. And one last thought I want to also bring to the picture is that everybody I want to bear in mind is that throughout this year, there's very few planned assets that actually came to happen for the coming academic year. I think the whole world is going to face 1 or 1.5 years of bulge in terms of demand versus availability of actual physical seats on the ground. I mean, and the market is going to realize this sometime by September 21, when you're going to be looking for a school, but the school in your neighborhood will now be been built because of all the COVID crisis and all the delays that are happening. So that's what I personally believe, and I think it's going to hit the market sometime by September 21, September 22.
Fascinating insight. That's very, very good. Thank you, Mohammed. And great to hear some optimism from both Mohammed and Bassem as well. And Sean, you're smiling. Sean's always optimistic. Tell us, Sean, your final reflections, if you don't mind. You're on mute, Sean. Yeah. Okay.
I think the region will bounce back, no doubt about it. You know, the populations in the GCC and wider MENA region are demanding better education. They are demanding better jobs, better employment opportunities. And with the global expansion of other industries, technology, other sectors that are, looking at the Middle East as a buoyant region. If you look at, obviously Amazon moving into the Middle East is a huge sign, which means that other investors and other industries will follow. So I always look at the bigger picture outside of education. I look at employment, I look at the other sectors. And when you see other sectors making big deals like this with international investors, that it means that the demand for education within the local populations is going to go up, because that's the key audience who are going to work within those sectors. So I'm optimistic. I think, as Mohammed said, it's been a great test for everyone. We've all been tested in more than one way, and I think we'll come out the other side stronger.
Good stuff, Sean. Nice to hear. Mansoor, final word for you.
I think final word would be that it's just sheer population. I mean, you have this pandemic. There is a sheer population in the region. There is except for UAE and some of the other GCC countries, most of in Saudi, you have only 10% in private sector, 90% in public sector. Same in Egypt and others. So there is a shift also. Even there is not new student, the student will shift from public sector to the private sector. The importance, so there's no doubt about it that things will bounce back. We still believe that physical schooling will be there. How it will change, to what extent, that we need to see in next 18 months or so, not in September. It will take another 18 months to 2 years to see what would be the future trend. But overall basis, there will be a demand. What you need to do is, and what you need to cater is, which we keep on saying for, at least I keep on saying for last 10 years or so, is that you should understand the market where you want to open your school. So just because you have a premium brand, or you have aspiration as an investor that I want to associate with one of the top brand in the world, if it is a wrong location, the brand will fail. So you need to be, so bring the right brand at the right location at the right fee level, depending upon who is your target market. And I hope that American operator will be more upfront. They start coming more here, but there is a huge demand for it. But unfortunately, they are not that. So the future we see, it's a wake up call, and it's a good wake up call, and it will basically help operators, especially, to look at increasing efficiencies, which will actually going to enhance their profitability and everything after 18 months or 2 years, because I believe a lot of operators are just becoming a bit laid back. Sorry, I've used this word, but they need to, tighten their belts and see where the money is not need to spend. So, and make is focus on the quality of education, not the physical building and other. That's, I think, the key messages.
Thank you, Mansoor. Thank you to our panel, who've been absolutely fantastic today. I've been so generous with their time and given us a lot of insights, and we're very candid. So thank you so much to our panel. Thank you for our attendees for listening. We have another webinar on Thursday in relation to real estate issues on campus, both K-12 and higher education. So Mansoor will be talking at that. So, but I hope you can join us for that. But in the meantime, I just want to wish you all a very good day, and be safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.